Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Sparkle here, and today's video is going to be a little bit more different because a lot of you guys wanted to see a video from me on how I draw bodies. So today I decided to share with you my process on how I draw bodies and give you some tips on anatomy. But keep in mind, this is not a tutorial, it's just my process, and there are a lot of different ways you can do it and no way is the wrong way. And also this video will be split into 5 different parts as you can see on the screen, and I'll try to add timestamps in the description as well. Alright, with all that aside, let's begin. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you is how I draw female bodies. So I always like to begin by sketching out a rough circle. This kind of helps me determine where I want the head to be. Then I draw 2 lines, one vertical and one horizontal, and these act as the guidelines and help me draw the face. From here I kind of just sketch out the jaw and the chin just to get a rough idea of where I want the face to be. And for this basic pose I'm going to be drawing it straight on. I also just went ahead and added the ears as well and roughly just added the top of the head, but at this point you can add in the eyes, nose and mouth, but today I'm not going to be doing that. So the next thing I do is I kind of just draw 2 lines to determine where the neck would be, and then from here I draw a triangle kind of shape. So as you can see, I extend 2 lines coming out from the neck and try to form this triangular shape. This just helps determine where the shoulders would be, and the 2 points on either end are pretty much where I'm going to draw the shoulders afterwards. And once I do that, I kind of go ahead and connect it to the neck to make it look right, and then here I draw a box kind of shape. Now this is the shape I like to use to mark out where the chest would go, and the way I think of it is kind of like a square that bends inwards as it goes further down. Then I draw a line. This is called the line of action, but in this case it's just going to be a straight line because this is going to be a basic pose. And the next thing I like to do from here is for female bodies, I like to add a bit of a curve from the chest to the hip. So what I like to do is I like to just draw 2 lines extending from the box, and then I draw 2 little arches underneath, and this will just mark the start of the legs. But when it comes to the actual legs, I like to sketch out a different line for each leg just so I can check the length before I go ahead and start sketching. Once I'm happy with the length, I draw 2 circles on either legs, one for the knee and one for the ankle. Sometimes I do circles for the ankles, but sometimes I just do triangles as well. In this case, I just did a triangle, and then all you have to do is go ahead and connect them together. Again, this is just my personal way of how I like to approach drawing bodies and anatomy, but of course there's no right or wrong way, so any way you choose to do it will be okay. Also, my process is never consistent, it changes all the time, but a lot of you guys have been asking for an anatomy tutorial kind of video for a long time, so I just hope this video helps you out. Anyways, what I do is once I finish up with the legs, I have a look at it, and if I'm not happy with it, that's the time where I go ahead and erase it and fix up my mistakes. In this case, I wanted to move the leg on the right side a bit more to the left, and that definitely made it look a bit better in my opinion. The next thing I do is I go ahead and draw the shoulders. Remember the triangle shape from before? Like I said, that's where the shoulders are going to start. So I did the same thing as I did with the legs. I drew out a line, then I drew out circles to mark out where the elbows would go, and I drew triangles to kind of mark out the palms of the hands. From here I kind of just go ahead and draw the fingers, but today I wasn't really worried about that. And anyways, after this what I do is I go ahead and grab my kneaded eraser and I light in the sketch and then go over it. Now usually I don't do this until I figure out what outfit I want to put the character in and the character's hairstyle, the eyes, nose, mouth and everything else. But today, since I was just working on the anatomy, I just went ahead and tried to define my sketch, and that's pretty much how it looks. Now the next thing I'm going to be showing you guys is how I draw the basic male structure. First off, I want to say that I'm not completely perfect in drawing male structure, male anatomy. I'm still practicing it myself, but I thought I'd share my current process with you guys. So as you can see, so far it's pretty much the same. I started with a circle, drew out the guidelines, the chin, the jaws, the ears, the neck, the triangular shape, then the box. But now what I'm doing is I'm drawing a more triangular shape for the hip instead, and I'm kind of just connecting the box to that triangular shape. Other than that, the rest of the process is pretty much exactly the same. For example, as you can see, I drew out 2 lines to mark out the length of the legs, then I drew circles to mark out the knees, triangles to mark out the feet, then I joined them together, and pretty much the exact same with the arms as well, with the lines, the circles, and connecting them all together. Then I drew triangles for the palms as well, and that's pretty much how I do it. And of course, like the other one, I went ahead and grabbed my kneaded eraser to redefine the sketch, but you can always skip this step if your initial sketch is light enough, or you can just leave it as it is. But in my case, I just like going in with a nice dark sketch and then defining it afterwards, so that's why I did that. Also, I wanted to make this page a little bit more colorful, so I went ahead and grabbed my highlighters and added some color. Alright, so time for the next part. So now I'm going to be showing you guys how I like to go about drawing poses that are a bit more dynamic or complex than the poses we just drew before. So I do still start out by drawing a circle, but for the guidelines, I have to decide which way I want the face to be facing. So in this case, I wanted the face to be tilted a little bit to one side, but still looking towards, well, you guys. So I kind of drew the guidelines like that. Then I drew the neck coming out, and then I drew the triangular shape. Also, when you're trying out new dynamic poses, I would definitely recommend try and use a reference. It will definitely help you out. And yeah, so now what I'm doing is I used my reference, and according to my reference, I drew the line of action. In this case, I could tell the body was bending back a bit, so I drew the line of action and then drew my box coming in that way. And then in this case, the girl's feet were kind of against the wall, so I was being really loose and I was just trying to draw rough lines to indicate where the feet would go, how the hip would bend and everything. I did try to follow the shapes from the basic structure that I showed you before, but I wasn't too worried about it because at this point what you really want to do is just focus on how everything looks in general, and then you can go ahead and erase everything and then try to define your sketch a bit more. This is usually how my first sketch would look, but with this dynamic pose, even I was having some problems. I could have just not showed you guys, but the thing is, artists, we have our ups and downs, and I want to show you my down today, and that is totally okay because you can always fix it up. So like I said, I went in with a loose sketch, then I went ahead and erased everything and defined my sketch. I mean, I could have just given up, but my best tip would be just don't give up, just go with the flow and try to simplify the shapes as much as you can before you go ahead and define everything. And now the next thing I'm going to be showing you guys is how I draw a seated pose. Now when I draw a dynamic pose or a seated pose, I pretty much go about both of them in a similar way. What I mean is that I go ahead and start with the face and I draw the guidelines, the circle, the neck, and then from this point I go ahead and follow the basic structure. But for both of them, what I like to do is I like to start off with a really loose, almost scribbly kind of sketch. And this is pretty much just so I can see where the shapes would be, where the body parts would be, and just so I can see if everything looks right, if anything's too long or anything. And once I'm done with that, then I go ahead and I lighten my sketch, or if I start off with a light sketch, I pretty much just go in with my pencil and define everything again. And this way it's just really good because if you start off with a loose sketch and you're not really stressed about how it's going to turn out, it will help your pose look a little less stiff and more flowy, which is what you want to go for. And then if you go ahead and define everything, you'll be able to get that right shape. So that's pretty much how I go about it. I feel like one of the reasons why I've been putting this video off so much for so many months is because I'm just not really good at explaining how my process works. But if I were to simplify it in 2 simple steps, I would say, firstly, start off with a loose, scribbly sketch and don't even worry about how it looks. Just make sure you get at the basic shape, the basic idea, and just make sure everything looks good in terms of proportions. And then go ahead and lighten your sketch and go in and define the shape, and that's pretty much how I do it. And some more tips is to use a reference, use the line of action, and try not to overcomplicate it, because if you do, your pose will most likely end up looking pretty stiff. And yeah, try as best as you can to break everything down into simple shapes. Also, at this point, I'm just trying to make the page a little bit more aesthetic and pretty and full, and I think it looks better after this. Also, sorry about the drastic change in lighting. The sun went down a lot quicker than I thought it would that day, but let's just try and ignore it. Alright, and I hope those tips helped you out. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is how I draw different body types. So the first thing I'm going to be focusing on is a wider body type. But before that, I do want to acknowledge that all body types are amazing and beautiful, and I think diversity and representation through art is really important. So of course, let's support all body types because everyone is beautiful no matter what. So what I like to do is I like to follow pretty much the same process, but when it comes to the hip, I like to make the hip just slightly wider. And when it comes to legs as well, I like to make the legs slightly wider. And pretty much what I do is when it comes to body parts that are a bit more wider or narrower, I just either elongate some of the proportions or I bring them more inwards and make them a bit more narrower. That's pretty much the main difference, but other than that, the main structure is pretty much the same. And again, just focus on the different shapes and don't try to overcomplicate it. And like I was saying before, just bring it more outwards, some of the body parts, or bring them more inwards depending on how you want your character to look. Alright, and the next thing I'm going to be doing is drawing a character that is a bit more shorter. And now when it comes to characters that are shorter or taller, I pretty much do the same thing with the head and the box, but then I like to make the proportions a little less longer or shrink them slightly. And again, all of these body types are beautiful and amazing, and this is pretty much how I do it. I just make the legs slightly smaller, or sometimes I like to bring the hips slightly higher, and sometimes even the arms as well. Or if it's longer, then I like to make the legs longer, the hips longer, the box slightly longer as well. And then in the end, you should be able to get whatever you want. And like I did before, I went ahead and redefined the sketch here as well. and by the way, I couldn't leave this page blank, could I? So I won this art contest recently and I got these really cool chalk markers. And I know you're meant to use chalk markers on smooth surfaces, but I couldn't resist from using them in my book. And they pretty much work like Posca markers, super smooth, super amazing. And they turned out so cool. They had this kind of matte finish, and here is how the final thing turned out. And anyways, here is pretty much how I draw a basic female structure, basic male structure, how I draw dynamic poses or more complex poses, seated poses, and how I draw different body types. Anyways, I hope this video helped you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fabulous day. Stay awesome as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!